We have liftoff and the clock is running. Hello Sim Gamers. As of the time of this recording, Kerbal Space Program has been out for about 3 weeks and has released its first patch. To be straightforward, I had recorded some episodes before, but it was just a little too buggy to do any real value in my opinion, and it frustrated me and slowed me down a little bit. So I lost a little motivation in getting back into Kerbal Space Program. But the patch has come out and I've seen some marked improvements on what the game has to offer. Or what the sandbox, I should say, have to offer. There's not really a game here yet. So this is Kerbal Space Program 2 Early Access version 0.1.1.0.21572. And I'm recording this on March 18th. It's a beautiful sunny day outside. My airplane is in for inspection, which means it's not a flying day. Just getting some annual maintenance done on the old airplane. So instead, I think I'll go to space. How does that sound? Let's kick off a new single-player campaign. Normal difficulty campaign name, we're going to call it Sim Campaign, because this will be the campaign for the channel. A simulated space agency will be the name. These colors are cool because now they can actually set the sort of the base and accent color, and by default everything we make will be these colors. So I'm going to go ahead and do something like this. I want like caution tape or sort of under construction white and orange, and then an icon that doesn't that's not the default icon, something a little different. This one looks good. Set agency colors. Don't forget to click that box. Please remember to click this box. If the colors aren't over here, then your agency colors aren't set. I made that mistake before. Let's start a campaign and see what's going on. Now, in future episodes, I want to be able to put together like time to shut up. Going to class.
Your new space program, leaping forward into the cosmos. Since the dawn of Kerbal kind, we have looked to the sky and wondered what sublime mysteries lie hidden in the darkness, like jewels never beheld. These untold treasures may soon reveal themselves due to the efforts recently founded Kerbal Space Program.
Oh my! I think that might have been the only copy of the orientation film. Hold on! Slides, somewhere. Welcome to your first day running the Kerbal Space Program. This campus hosts the greatest ever gathering of astronomers, astronauts, and engineers. After years of focused effort, this collection of geniuses has created several very impressive buildings. We believe we have all the necessary pieces to take our first steps off the ground. The best way to advance our technologies further is to get up there and learn by doing. All we need now is somebody to show us how to put all these parts together. Well, we also need somebody to help us out with the flying. We need a lot of help, actually. That's why you're here. My name is Paige, by the way. If you need any hints, feel free to visit me over at the training center. Everything in there is well padded, so it's a great place to get up and running. Welcome aboard!
Welcome aboard indeed. The voice actors for these are spectacular. Amazing voice actors. The Carl Sagan homage is fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Carl Sagan's work. So let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to Kerbal Space Center. This campus has everything you need to turn your fledgling space program into the stuff of legends. Our engineers have created a training program that will guide you through building and flying your very first rocket. You can go through those lessons here at the training center. If you want to start building right away, the vehicle assembly building is where you want to be. I'm going to leave the training center for you to do and discover on your own time if you haven't already done it or seen it. I'm sure there are other videos and stuff out there as well throughout the YouTube verse. But we're going to jump right into the vehicle assembly building. A decent one-stop look at how Kerbal Space Program is doing, and how things are working, and sort of where the gaps and weaknesses and strengths of the game are, can be found in the Apollo Style Moon Landing Mission. So that's what we're going to build and execute in this first episode of Let's Play Kerbal Space Program Early Access. Page says, "Welcome to the Vehicle Assembly Building," or VAB. I call it the VAB. Because it's fabulous. Oh, I can't believe I just said that out loud. This is where you assemble vehicles to take you wherever you want to go. This is the parts picker. You take pieces from the picker and place them in your workspace. A good starting rocket has a command pod, an engine, and a fuel tank, holding the fuel the engine needs. You can view parts by category. You can also search and sort parts. By default, parts are sorted by type. If you have a part you use often, you can add it to your favorites by clicking the middle mouse button. You can construct several assemblies or sections of your vehicle at the same time. The assembly marked with the green icon is your launch assembly. It is what goes out the door when you select launch. Use the engineer's report to see how your vehicle will perform. It will give you useful stats and a list of potential problems. For example, you can see the engineer's report to see if you have the thrust-to-weight ratio over 1, which means your rocket will actually leave the launch pad. So the thrust-to-weight ratio is literally how much thrust your rocket produces versus compared to as a ratio against the force of gravity. And if it's less than 1, then there is more gravity pulling you down than there is force coming out of your rocket trying to push you up. And it's a great way to burn a lot of fuel without going anywhere. Over here is the trip planner. Use it to plot a destination and ensure your vehicle has the ability to get there. Once you're ready to fly, select the launch button. As long as your vehicle fits completely within the vehicle assembly building, it will be moved out to your chosen launch location. The training center teaches everything from basic rocket construction to orbital mechanics. It's both fun and informative. And I have to say, the training videos the training in this game is really, really, really good. So from that perspective, onboarding is awesome. So what I hope the developers are able to take into consideration as they continue to grow this new iteration of Kerbal Space Program is realize that science mode, or even full-blown commercial mode with money handling and all that kind of stuff, is an onboarding procedure. If done right, you start the person off with access to very, very little, right? And right there, just in time, give them tutorials, say, hey, here are the 4 parts you can use to launch your very first vehicle. Here's how you put it together. Here's how you set up your staging. Your rocket is now ready to go, and leave all the other buildings and stuff out of the picture. Like the only thing, I wish they had this in Kerbal Space Program 1. Let me expound for just a little bit. In Kerbal Space Program 1, think of all the buildings that are around, even when you start a new career. If instead of having all that noise, I mean, what do you do? Anyone who's played Kerbal Space Program 1 in career mode knows. What do you do? It's the very first thing you do. You go to the command center, pick 2 missions, usually one to launch your first rocket and collect some science. You go to the vehicle assembly building, you build the basic rocket with the very few parts you have to build your rocket, and you do some science on the pad, you launch it, do some science in the air, do some science when you're splashed down, and that's it, right? But there's like 18 other buildings. I'm being hyperbolic, of course. And that makes it difficult to understand for a new player what's going on. So, devs, for career mode for this game, or science mode for this game, start small. Start with what the people can actually do. After they've successfully completed a particular milestone in their first launch, unlock additional capabilities, and then explain what they are. Back to our Apollo Style Mission, which is a much more complex thing, right? Consider when the United States first made it to the moon, they had Mercury on a Redstone rocket. Then they had Mercury on the Atlas rocket. Then they had Gemini, right, on its stack to do orbital maneuvers and stuff to understand that. And all the while, Apollo's being built. Apollo gets built, and they're finally able to put together all the learnings that they got from Mercury and Gemini into a single mission. So we're fast forwarding to that point, essentially, in the career here. So I have a few vehicles I need to make. The first obvious one, well, let's follow some of the information. We have the the trip planner. So we're going to plan a mission from Kerbin to the Mun. I could say it's a round trip, but this is misleading. I don't need all this delta V going back. So this is actually telling me how much change in velocity, how much I need to accelerate in order to complete each of these phases of the orbit. Now, Kerbin low orbit, 3400 delta V, that's if you fly fairly efficiently. So we're going to want to make sure that we have significantly more than that. Moon intercept, that's from Kerbin low orbit. And I wish they told me what the orbit was like. It'd be nice to know, is this an 80 kilometer by 80 kilometer orbit? What kind of orbit are we talking here? Moon intercept, 860 delta V. That's just to get from wherever our low orbit on Kerbin to wave at the moon as we pass by. Then 280 delta V to turn that flyby into an actual low orbit around the moon. It's usually 2 burns. One to whatever our current periapsis is, usually too far away, to slow down to establish an orbit, and then we want to kind of bring that orbit closer in, and then another burn at the new periapsis to circularize. And then it says 580 delta V to reach the moon surface. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing this wrong. This is the Mun surface. So if we rewind some of that, we know that climbing off of the Mun surface is going to take another 580 delta V. So our Mun lander needs to have at least, I'm going to call it 1200 delta V, right? The more it has, the better. Our command module needs to be able to have 280 delta V left over from everything that it's done to get to this point, to leave the Mun. And a little more. I'm not sure exactly how much more, but sufficiently more that it can actually not only leave Mun orbit, but also at the same time lower our periapsis with respect to Kerbin for re-entry. We'll do an atmospheric re-entry, an aero brake, and re-entry, so we won't need to worry about any additional delta V beyond that point. So I'm kind of working backwards here for the different vehicles. The Mun surface, 580 delta V. Now I want to make a 1200 delta V or better landing craft. So let's go find ourselves a nice command pod for that. If we're going to use this Mark 13 gumball, it has room for 3 crew people. Which means we can use Mark 1 Explorer. It's a cozy 2-seat lander. I'm curious, what are the relative sizes, right? So we could do something like this, but it seems like the lander is awfully large. By comparison to something like this guy, right? So let's get our moon lander going. Okay. When I was testing this before in a previous save, I found I didn't bring enough RCS, or I should say I brought barely enough RCS because orbital maneuvers are hard, turns out. Anyway, here's our Mun lander. It has 0 delta V. So let's fix that. Is this a medium-sized thing? No, this is a small-sized thing. I mean, we could use medium-sized parts on it, I suppose. We really wanted to. We could have the Mun lander be 2 stages. More like the actual one. Just have a little... you know what? I'm curious. Let's find out what that would look like. Let's put a little small guy on there. and put the teeniest, tiniest engine we can find. This thing. Boop. That is 1300 Delta V. Really? This is 1300 Delta V. So 1300 Delta V is pretty good if we make no mistakes. I'm going to actually give me some error margin here, so let's add just a little additional zhuzh in the fuel can. Can we do something like this? Just to give it a touch more. 1700 Delta V, that's a 3x factor of what we need to land on Mun comfortably. And this actually gives us a nice platform for other things. So we need now, we need, one of the things I've found before was an issue was I just simply did not have enough monopropellant, and I was using these kind of things, right? So I'm actually going to plop on a full-blown thing like that. So our Delta V has gone down significantly, but it doesn't take into consideration the Delta V on the for the monopropellant. Maybe I don't need that much monopropellant on the Mun lander. It's an extra small. Let's see about attaching a couple of tanks here. Like so. This looks pretty cool so far. Other things this thing will need, right? I want it center of mass and center of, well, I don't need center of thrust, center of mass, which is way down there. We are going to want to include some RCS, of course. Because if this thing's going to dock, where is it? Is it a quality of life? Utility? Yes, utility. Okay, here we go. There's a basic set of engines, RCS, to maneuver this pod around from here, there, and everywhere. The other possibility is, what if, okay, here's a crazy idea. What if all we do with this thing is get it into orbit and we use the RCS on the command module to do all the maneuvers? Oh. Redundant systems are built into these systems for a reason. So we'll go ahead and put RCS thrusters on here. We still have 1300 Delta V. But it makes me kind of nervous. That's awfully close to. I'm going to try something like this. 1700 Delta V is pretty good. We need some things to land. We're going to want a ladder. Things like that. Payloads. Ground. Here we go. Do we even need them to be that big? Maybe these guys? This is where the pilots come in and out of the thing. So if we want a ladder there, we can just do triple symmetry. Like this. So it looks like extended. Boop. Bring this down as far as I can. And that ought to work. Okay, we've got landing gear. Now how about a ladder to get in and out of the pod? Probably this one. Doesn't need to have any symmetry. That's awfully big. What about this one? Yeah, there we go. And last but not least, certainly, we have a docking ring. This is clocking in at just over 1500 delta V, almost 1600 delta V, which should be great as far as our launching and landing vehicle, right? Or for the Mun. Now, oh, hang on. This is stuff that I always forget. Communications and electrical. So it's not going to need parachutes, right? It is going to need... you know what would be handy that I didn't have before? Like a spotlight. See where the heck we're actually landing. Rotate it just a little bit, just in case we need a spotlight. We've got our ladder. I want some additional electrical. Snap one of these in here easily enough. Give it plenty of electrical. Still over 1500 delta V, which is not quite, but almost 3 times what this thing needs. Great. There's our lander majigger. It's going to use this gimbaled engine to do all of its functions. Okay. Now, a new assembly. And this is one of the great things about this workshop, is the ability to just do this. I'm going to set this as my launch vehicle and start assembling here. Launch vessel currently has 2900 delta V as is, which is actually a fair bit. Now we are anticipating that this is going to do all of the maneuvering as far as docking and everything is concerned. So I need to make sure to address that by making sure it has plenty of monopropellant. When I've done this before, like I said, I used, you know, a few of these and it just wasn't enough. So we're gonna toss in a ring of mono P. And there's a command module that can take command of the situation. Center mass is right there. Now this does have RCS thrusters built in, which is kind of cool. It's something that... So we'll go ahead and just pair a set of thrusters essentially along with what those ones are at the bottom. That gives us full vehicle control. The power situation. This thing's going to need a battery. I could just put on a generator, I suppose, right? Apollo actually used a fuel cell. One medium-sized battery. 1800 Delta V. So, well, and that's 1800 Delta V without the Moonlander attached, right? And we're going to want some stuff. We're going to want some communications. Okay. Right, we'll, I guess just do the same over here. Should be good enough. I do need to decouple. Oh yeah, of course. And we got a whole. Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to have the re-entry vehicle only. Now, currently, heat shields aren't required. However, I'm going to get into the habit of using them because they eventually will be. Small docking port and let's get zoomed in here and take a look at mounting a couple of radials. Can, of course, take these and cheat them in just a little bit. Or not. Wrong buttons. If I turn this and turn snap off, and just to make this parachute pack look a little more integrated. All right. So here's our re-entry vehicle, just this guy. And that means we're going to need to start talking about our stacks here. So we have a stack decoupler. I'm sorry. Yeah, stack decoupler. Separate out this. So this is a ship that now has an amount of Delta V that it's not telling me. Can you maybe give me some information, game? It says 1600 Delta V. Could be because of my staging is all messed up. There we go. All right. So it was not able to calculate that based on staging. So with this, we should be able to easily do a moon intercept. Like if it wasn't carrying any extra weight. Moon intercept, moon low orbit, moon escape, which is another 280. So that's, let's see, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 Delta V. And that's if this craft has to do all of the work. Let's go ahead and focus on this vehicle. And I'm going to reroute this to here if I can. Assembly anchor. That one. So now we can actually take a look at what it looks like when these things are connected. right? In this configuration, this engine is up here. It's not on. You can see that the launch vessel has a total of 1,800 delta V is what it says. What happens if I get rid of this? Actually goes down. Oh, is there a way to tell me which? Here we go. Delta V for this stage, 1,476. And of course we can modify our staging here. 1,476 delta V. This being our core launch vessel. Now this isn't going to start attached like this, of course. We're doing the Apollo style landing, so it's actually going to be configured in a cargo hold, waiting for us to extract it. So let's figure that out. Should be able to grab ourselves a nice medium stack separator. And maybe a small one of these. And now we're getting into payloads. Because we want to make this aerodynamic, right? So in order to make this payload nice and stable, I am going to add some space duct tape. Like so. All that should break away when staging occurs. Let's go ahead and construct this fairing. And fidgeting with these fairings is always, shall we say, interesting. There we go. Looks good. Oh, wait a second. That presumes... I think I'm going to want a bigger... I'm going to go with a bigger... lower stage. One of the cool things about Delta V is you can it's very difficult to have too much of it. Well, that was an engine mount. Wrong thing. I want aerodynamics. I want payloads. A large one of these guys, and then we'll go ahead and go into structures. Put in the internal braces and then get to work on this fairing. I wish it were possible to get this to clamp on right. Okay, good enough. That'll have to be good enough. All right. So now we're ready to just have like a nice, not very, we don't even need it to be very big. I don't even know if we need it to be that big. We're looking at large. Right? Yes. What if we did something like this? Mammoth 2, the Rhino. Labradoodle. So I'm looking at all these engines for sort of the different mission types, right? The Poodle is a high ISP in the vacuum engine. The mainsail is it has much better ISP in the atmosphere than, say, the Poodle does. Also has way more thrust. Let's stick a Labradoodle on here. And we're just going to go ahead and go through and check all of our staging because this is already getting complex. So working from dawn, we're running on this thruster. Everything's fine. We open the thing. We don't disconnect that yet. Yeah, we'll disconnect this. I'm not activating the main engine. This will all be done with RCS. We do a whole bunch of maneuvering, flying around, turn this on. Eventually, we're going to disconnect and all that kind of stuff. Take this apart. This is eventually going to moon land. So this one will come here. And eventually we're decoupling and heading back in. The stage is gone. All right. So we're inserting into orbit, maybe lunar insertion, depending on how much delta V this has left over. Getting rid of, opening up our coupler. And stack separating. This guy flies around, turns around, does his maneuvers, docks up with that, and then we're ready to decouple from the service module. We can turn on our main engine, do any flight corrections we need to make, decouple moon landing, return, dock, we're back to main engine. Yeah, okay. So this stack is looking good so far. Now, how are we doing on our delta V? So we have 4,000, which is probably realistically just enough to get us into orbit overall, right? Especially since this only has 2,400 delta V, and that's under perfect conditions. So we know that we need to lift this whole vehicle off the ground, generally speaking, which is going to take one of these, and then a big one of these. Engines, the big fat engine. Mammoth. Looks like the Rhino's the way to go. Look at this beast. Okay, so let me rearrange things here, though. Yeah, that looks cooler. Where those stripes line up. What's this? Stages. Thrust to rate ratio? Yeah. The thrust to rate ratio is not enough, at least to start with. Oh, the mammoth. Holy mama, give me that mammoth. 1.8. And our first stage allegedly has 2200 delta V, which gets us about 2/3 of the way up into orbit. Right? We decouple, activate this engine. And then the next stage has 2400 delta V. This might be enough. But let's try. The mammoth has more than twice the thrust of the rhino for more than twice the mass. The rhino is slightly more efficient across the board. Giving us more delta V in the first stage, allegedly, supposedly. But of course, we do know that it is not enough without some help. So let's give it some help. Now, I don't know if we need 4 of these guys. They're mediums. Jesus, these are gigantic. Or not. Or we could do the, let's do some asparagus staging. Maybe. Now, Apollo didn't really have asparagus staging technology. So, I'm not going to do it here. It's going to rely on 2 boosters. Is it engines? Yeah, 2 boosters to get us with these small guys, I guess. And then aerodynamics to give these things a nose cone, right? Since these are sticky outy boosters, we'll put them there. All right, what's my thrust to weight ratio now? Not the parts manager. Engineer's report. So all these fire off together, and then we get rid of the boosters. Still only 0.7. Okay. Well, in that case, no matter which way we slice it, we need the mammoth. Which means you probably don't need the boosters. 1.8 thrust to weight ratio. 1 mammoth engine to rule them all. Take a look at our trip planner. First stage, 2,200 delta V. Second stage, 2,400 delta V, which is a total of 4,600 delta V, which is definitely enough to get us into Kerbal low orbit. Or should be enough to get us into Kerbal low orbit. Now, of course, we could modify this. We might find during launch that it just isn't quite enough, and that's okay. Then we're decoupling, launching that engine. Okay, cool. We get ourselves into orbit situated. We get rid of this. We get rid of that. Our begin maybe part of our translunar injection. Right? TLI is 8,600 delta V. So that gives us a total of 4,300 delta V that we need. And according to this, we're there with a little bit of room to spare. I'm not sure how much room to spare. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure we have a little error margin. So those numbers sound tight to me based on what I have, information that's in the game. So I'm going to go ahead and add some boosters. Worst case scenario is we end up not needing them, right? Medium monsters. Now we'll go small monsters. And of course, when it comes to using boosters, we want some space duct tape. Just to make sure everything's nice and stable when we're going up. Okay, everything runs at the same time. Although I may not have this throttled all the way up. We're decoupling to get rid of empty booster stages. Let's go ahead and good old Scott Manny with his fly safe. This is not Apollo, this is Simpolo. Simpolo. Which could be misread as Simp-Olo, so we're gonna skip that. We're gonna be Paul. Save it. Last but not least, some trusses. And maybe move it so it's not quite so high off the ground. There we go. Simpol Mooner style landing, Apollo style landing craft should be available. I feel like I'm missing something though. I've got plenty of battery power. I'm not going to worry about solar power or anything like that. All right. I think at this point we're pretty much ready to launch and find out what horrible things we've done. Oh, crew management. We will have 3 people in the main craft. One person will go down as explorer at a later time. To start off with, all 3 Kerbins are in here. Are you ready to fly? Here are a few pointers. This element is your flight cluster. It contains all of your flight controls and information. Here you can speed up or pause time. You can still move your camera and interact with part functions when you're paused. This is your staging stack. It shows the order in which your rocket parts will activate. Remember, the first stage is at the bottom of the stack. If you'd like to learn to fly in a safe, simulated environment, be sure to check out the training center. And I've noticed one issue already. We released the rockets before the rocket engines are going, so we're going to go ahead and just change that really quick. Thank you. F5 for a quick save. One of the things I loved about this game when I first launched it, even with all the bugs and stuff, was how the launch sequence and music is presented. So I'm going to hit the go button and we're going to shut up and let you enjoy it as well. We have liftoff and the clock is running. Pitch program. Pitch program complete. Locking gimbals and controls to prograde. We can go ahead and throttle down to conserve thrust on the main engine now that we're away from the launch pad. Oh, we've lost control. Losing control. Need that gimbal. This would be a lot easier if I had fins. Aerodynamic forces were pushing us off course. That's okay. Throttle down for staging. Staging. Throttle up. And I'm actually going to go ahead and kick off the throttle for now. We're coasting to, well, actually, no, we'll keep it going. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going half throttle. Want to keep getting our apoapsis up to at least 70 kilometers. Personally, I'm going to aim for 80. And I'm seeing some particular control issues here, so we're going to go ahead and abort and revert to the vehicle assembly building. So this is where we get to experiment and iterate over the rocket. Two things I noticed. First of all, I didn't put any aerodynamic surfaces on the rocket, which means the only control I have is the gimbaled engine. If that gets out of whack, then all sorts of things are happening wrong. So we're going to put some aerodynamic control at the bottom and use that. Basically, if I just put a small wing down here. That wing's too big. Wish I had a smaller wing. That's a stabilizer is too small. This stabilizer will probably be enough. Especially if I put it on 4x symmetry. That's the small one. What's the medium one look like? It looks hilariously large. But we have procedural stabilizers, so we can actually modify it. Wingspan, wing angle, tip length. Isn't there a way to? Yes. Change the wingspan. So bring the wingspan a little bit. That looks all right. The other thing I want to change on here, oop, gosh dang it. Undo that. I'm going to take the authority limiter down to half. Because we're going to have the gimbal on the engine, which I'll also actually... Or maybe, actually, here's what we do. 0. Or maybe just a little bit. 5? Very little control authority from this. This is mainly for stabilization. The gimbal will be able to do most of the work. And of course the SES up at the top where the command module is. Double check that our crew hasn't arbitrarily changed. It has not. Save this. And we can try it again. So pretty much as soon as I get into roll program, I'm going to throttle down is what I'm going to do. Countdown. We've successfully splashed down because we forgot to fix our staging. I'm amazed we didn't blow up. Save that once again. Try it one more time. So what's going to happen now is the rocket engines are going to start and everything's going to be at full throttle. We will then release. Clamps removed. Liftoff and the clock is running. Surface speed 100. Coming up on 100. Pitching over to gravity turn. SAS disabled. Throttle down. We'll let the boosters do most of the work. So our aerodynamic surfaces down here are doing exactly what we expect them to. They keep the rocket pointed into the atmosphere. The gravity turn is taking care of the rest, where gravity has a natural tendency to change our arc over. That way we don't need to worry about any control inputs or anything like that. High above the clouds, Apoapsis already 10 kilometers. Okay, we're at 45 degrees, maximum pressure. Boom. Throttle off for staging. Staging. Throttle on. Full power. Now we want to go ahead and turn our SAS and get ourselves prograde because we're getting up out of this atmosphere. Now I'm just inputting some manual control to try and keep our plane more or less on the horizon where we want it. Unfortunately, we are pushing quite horizontally into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is still a little thick, so we're losing some delta V to that fact. We might want to adjust our flight trajectory in the future going forward. Or for that, coming up on main engine cutoff. Main engine cutoff. Staging. Seco. Second engine ignition. And this is the workhorse that will continue to push us all the way up into orbit. And then circularize once we get there. As well as provide most of the thrust, if not all the thrust, to get us to the Mun. I'm going to go ahead and change some parameters here. Let's get this gimbal limit down to 50%. Apoapsis coming up on 80 kilometers, which is a nice usable orbit. There we go. Second engine cutoff. This engine is designed to stop and restart. Once we reach the Apoapsis, we're going to go ahead and create a maneuver plan. You've added a maneuver plan. Maneuver plans predict the result of a burn at a set orientation and duration. Once you've placed a plan, you can use it as a guide for your next maneuver. You can learn more about maneuvers at the training center. Check out the tutorial called Orbital Transfers for more info. All right, so we've got this maneuver plan in play. We can't edit it while paused, which I think is unfortunate. We're just going to go ahead and pull out ourselves a prograde thrust until we more or less circularize. We can fidget with this a little bit if we want to. Apoapsis 88, periapsis 71. That should be good. So we have a 33-second burn coming up here in about a minute and a half. One of the coolest things I noticed about this game is the music direction is spectacular. The whole game is scored, the entire thing. It uses dynamic music. So the whole time I was doing a test mission earlier when I was running into bugs and stuff to get to the Mun and do all that stuff, everything had soundtrack to it. which makes for a really, really enjoyable experience. I mean, look at this. Look at these clouds. Look at this band of stars. The graphics are great. Looks like I'm getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 frames. Ignition in 1 minute. And we can go ahead and aim towards our thrust vector. About 40 seconds before second engine ignition. And this just gets us to establish a nice round orbit around Kerbin, where we can then plan our Lunar something insertion burn. 15 seconds to ignition. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. You can see us burning through our fuel in this second engine. 20 seconds to engine cutoff. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cutoff. Let's see how we actually did here. Any residuals? 82 by 80. Oh, that's a tasty circular orbit. That's freaking delicious. I can eat that orbit up all day long. Coming up on the dark side of the planet here. But what we can start doing is planning our lunar insertion burn. So typically in Kerbal Space Program 1, you would sort of look at a burn just over the horizon where you could start seeing the mun. So we can start something maybe here, and I'm going to go ahead and set this as my target. We can see my ascending and descending node is 0.9 degrees. So in fact, we will go ahead and actually do a mid-course correction burn. I want to ditch this maneuver. And I want to take this. This is the descending node. What that means is basically, so this is the node where we cross over the same orbital plane as the mun. And because this is the descending node, this is basically where we come from higher than its plane, so to speak, more northern, to transitioning to the south. So that means my orbital plane is 1 degree off like this. So we're just going to go ahead and add a maneuver right here. And this maneuver is going to be a plane change. This is the descending node. I want to thrust this direction to decrease this to as close to 0 as I reasonably can. We can go ahead and get ourselves positioned for this maneuver. Little F5 for the sake of saying we quick saved. And we can actually just warp to this maneuver. Less than 30 seconds for this burn. Our pilot is currently orienting a ship. And it's a tiny burn, just 2 seconds, so I'm not even going to use full throttle. Just watch this value. So this tells me essentially how much delta V I need to really apply. Boop. And how do we do? 0.1 degrees is good enough for me. So once again, we need to plan our next maneuver, which is somewhere over the horizon, approximately here. This engine might not have enough to do all this in one go. No, it should. Actually, we got 1500 delta V. We know it takes 800 and something for the lunar transfer. Once again, setting this target. No, it's still our target. Okay. And I'm actually going to plan for a collision with the Mun. I'm just tuning this to take a look at here to find the closest point. Constantly adjusting a little bit, right? And we'll just keep pushing this program guide and tuning this until such time as we find ourselves. Oops. With an actual collision vector. Like so. That is set to collide with Mun, which is fine by me because we'll then just adjust with the command module once we're there. This burn is in slightly more than 5 minutes. It's a 1.5 minute burn, consisting of 859 delta V, which this engine definitely has more than enough to do. So here's the mission parameter for this particular stage. This particular stage is meant to accelerate us towards the Mun and not much else. So that's why I'm impacting it, smashing it face first into that Mun. Once we get this established, we will go ahead and do our maneuvers to decouple and do the Apollo rotate and docking and decouple of the lander, and then we'll do a mid-course correction to actually establish an orbit around them, or a flyby the Mun. So for all that, let's go ahead and fast forward to the next mission phase. All right, less than 30 seconds to our burn here. God, this music is actually really inspiring. It's really interesting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. I'm gonna make this engine work for about a minute or so, using up a fair bit of the additional fuel we have before we punch the Mun in the face with the leftover rocket. Now, one experiment that real NASA has actually done is that with a ground station that had a seismometer, NASA has crashed objects into the Mun to basically get seismometer readings. 15 seconds to cut off. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Second engine cutoff. We'll check our actuals and see how we've done. Oop. Looks like we've just got ourselves a flyby here, and handily enough, we got ourselves a free return trajectory. So I'm actually going to do one correction. I want to go ahead and have impact with Mun, then get configured, and then do a course correction. So I'm specifically electing to intentionally cause an impact. Small thrust, impact right in the center. Okay. I think we are now relatively well configured. I'm going to go ahead and do two things. I'm going to quick save and I'm going to save. This stage is now no longer needed, and we are ready to begin the additional work of configuring for Munner we've done the Munner insertion. Or, I'm sorry, this is the trans-Munner injection, the TMI. We will then do the Munner insertion burn on the, well, we need to do mid-course correction to get ourselves a better approach. Then do Munner insertion burn. But in order to prepare for all that, we need to configure the aircraft, or the spacecraft. So first things first, these fairings gone. Goodbye, fairings. Next things next. We're still stable. I am actually going to send one of the Kerbals. Man, I got one too many Kerbals in this thing. How the... But I didn't... But I guess Jebediah is going to be in orbit around the moon for a very long time. Sorry, Jeb. Okay. We will just turn on the RCS. Decouple. RCS backwards thrust. A little horizontal. Just want to get myself configured here. We're going to go ahead and control from here. And we're going to set this as target. I said we're going to control from here. All right. Well, I guess I have to do this manually. No big deal. Upward thrust. Go ahead and rotate around. Oh, sorry. Here, let's just face the object. How about that? Okay. There is a camera view for this. Chase, horizon, celestial, capture. Bingo. Okay, forward thrust. Gonna come up more. It's looking pretty good. And capture. Okay, we now have the craft under our control here. So we are at a point where we can go ahead and decouple from the stage. And just all that maneuvering and stuff didn't appreciably change anything we got going on here. Quick save. And sure. Sure. I don't know what happened to it. Where is it? Can't control it. Doesn't matter. It's not here anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and separate this stage because for some reason it combined them. And we are now ready to activate this engine. Perfect. Okay, now, if I was really, really smart, I would set myself up for a free return trajectory. do I not have? Okay. Let's try loading our quick save and see if that helps. So there's no reason why it seems like we had an issue with mass and control. Okay, good. Now we have mass and control. I don't know why we didn't have control before, but we do now. Everything's fine. We still need to enable that engine. Engine enabled. Double check it. Yep. Okay, now we're shooting for free return trajectory, so we're actually going to thrust prograde here a little bit. That's the opposite of free return, but that's okay. Now what we need to do is plan a maneuver. I wish I could plan a maneuver in here. It'd be really nice. As opposed to along here, right? This would be a great line to be able to work with. But what we can do is actually just warp to here. Bingo. We're currently on a lunar escape trajectory, and we want to solve that. So I'm going to go ahead and burn retro. Okay, so I'm just getting this set down fairly low. 25 kilometers should be pretty good. And actually, I'm going to actually go ahead and point us towards the maneuver node that we've set up, or the maneuver vector that we've set up. And I'm going to quick save and time forward to this burn. 30 seconds away. It is happening on the dark side of the Mun. Where is the Mun anyway? There he is. Coming up on the next burn cycle here. And everything from here on out is going to be done with this command module. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Something is wrong. Probably facing the wrong way. Yep. We're gonna go ahead and have to ditch this maneuver node and do this manually. And that's okay. We'll just go to the map and take care of it there. So as long as this stage doesn't use any more than about half its fuel, I'll be pretty satisfied. clean up our residuals here. 25 kilometers. That's good. Create a maneuver point here to do a retrograde burn. And because we're around the Mun, really doesn't take much. $74 delta V is practically nothing. 41 seconds or 40 seconds before this burn, we'll go ahead and get ourselves set up. And then we can start thinking about a landing place. Everything's aligned, 25 seconds to go. So we're starting to have these drums come in to signify we're in a different place, slightly doing a different thing. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. 2, 1, cutoff. See how that did with our residuals. 28 by 24, it's good enough for me. If I really wanted to be picky, I could just do this a little bit. 24 by 25. And with all that done in the back side of the dark side of the moon, we'll go ahead and quick save. In fact, I'll just save the game here. Like so. Confirm. All right, had to step away for a little bit, but we're back. Let's see here. Now I'm going to start talking about landing places. We are in a standard orbit, I guess you could say, around Mun. And any one of these large flat areas would be an excellent place to land. So, basically, as soon as we get into the light, where we can actually see what the heck we're doing, we will configure for landing, which means separating once again, getting this craft stood up and running on its own. I wonder if we'll see the sun or Kerbin first. Will it be Kerbin rise over the moon horizon? There's the sun. So now that we can see what we're doing, let's just go ahead and point to toward the ground. Gives us all the light we could ever need. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to change some factors on here. I want to change my acquisition forces on both of these while I have them set up. Disable some fuel cross feeds. I don't want those on. Okay. Now we can decouple and this guy should be ready for his Mun landing, basically. I'm going to decouple and then kind of just use RCS, so we'll get ourselves nice and stable here. Undock. Little reverse thrust. Little forward thrust just to match velocities, right? Like so. And we're essentially in station keeping with that other craft. Quick save. Turn off the RCS. We'll leave the SAS on for this craft. Actually, we'll. Yes, we will. No, we won't. I don't know. Okay. Munner landing time. I want to have a nice landing strip right along in here somewhere probably. So with this ship, control from here, make sure our orientation is correctly set, turn retrograde, extend the old landing gear, and make sure this engine is in fact enabled, which it is. Oof. Almost had a collision there. Right in the middle of this plane looks really good over that mountain. All right, default name 5 is now headed out all by itself. How do I rename a vessel anyway? So these, one thing that's important about the interface is that all these buttons are clickable, or do something like this. This switches from sea level to ground level, so it tells me how far above the ground I am at any time. This is going to be really important. And this changes between orbital speed and surface speed. Or if I actually have another craft selected or another body selected, I can have my velocity relative to the target. So we're essentially just now in the coasting phase where we're coasting to our rendezvous. We can probably time warp to here. And I want to get myself oriented so that flying this thing makes sense. Okay, pitches backwards if I do that. The easiest type of the easiest type of mun landing is really just let your pilot do most of the work. If you face retrograde and just use the throttle, right? This is a gimbaling throttle. Then everything else kind of takes care of itself. Your pilot's going to orient the craft to make sure that thrust is always pointed in the right direction. And what I'm watching for here really is, with this configuration, kind of a guideline, right? As long as my ground speed is or my ground altitude is no less than 10 times my surface speed, or my orbital speed, I should say. I'm going to switch to orbital speed. Then we should be able to stop in time. We're going to have to hover over that mountain. So I'm going to go ahead and kick up the throttle here. And we see our ground speed and orbital speed are kind of keeping pace. In fact, what happens if I hit the brakes and land before this mountain? As we slow down and our apoapsis, or I'm sorry, our orbital line sort of intersects with mun, our pilot is naturally going to orient us towards the ground. So I'm going to keep myself just a very little bit of thrust here. And we have used almost exactly half our fuel, so this maybe wasn't quite big enough. Just trying to stop our lateral movement here. We're moving laterally so hard. Oh shit. Oh no. Oh no. Ah! It's fine. Everything's fine. We're totally fine. I don't even know what I was worried about. Oh, hell yeah. Look at that. Oh, sometimes I love the game. All right, well, cool. Well, apparently you have landed on our engine bell here, but that's okay. We can extend the ladder. And then have... I'm going to go ahead and just set all of these to maximum. All right. Save that. SAS off. Jebediah? All right, game bugs. We are on the surface of the moon. Go ahead and plant our flag. Jeb was here. Boom. We're just gonna go ahead and use our SAS here to stand ourselves back up. It's a good thing we have incredibly strong gyroscopes in this thing. And now we get ourselves ready for a rendezvous. I'm thinking maybe when the craft is about here. So here's the plan for the rendezvous. All I'm going to worry about is getting Jeb back into orbit. And it might be a lower orbit. It might be 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers. We'll see what type of delta V we have left over when we get to that point. But I'm just going to get him into a more or less circular orbit. And then we're going to let the command module do the work of modifying its orbit for a rendezvous and docking with this moon capsule. Even though we don't have enough space in the command module, right? We want to be able to prove out that technology. Jeb will just have to be stranded in space until we send a rescue mission. So about here probably looks good. Gonna go ahead and set this as target, right? Ground, orbit, And we need to head on a heading of 090, which is this way. Turn our SAS on. And really, once we're off the ground, we can just go like this. This is chewing through our engines. Makes me nervous. 7, 8, 9, 20 kilometers. So this is a nice shallow orbit with our periapsis out here. Not entirely sure why my orbit lines aren't showing, but doesn't matter. We'll just time skip towards when we're up at 20 kilometers and then reactivate our engines to circularize. So currently our orbit is smaller. While it has less energy than the orbit of the command module, it is smaller, which means we complete it more quickly. The command module is actually, its orbit has more energy, but it takes a longer time for it to complete. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get a rendezvous point. And there are a couple of tricks we can use to do that. And if we prove that we can do this, basically what we can do is we can leave Jeb in orbit around Mun indefinitely with all of his snacks on board until we send out a rescue mission, because we know how to... Okay, we need to face prograde. Actually, we need to face a little higher than prograde. So I... overshot periapsis. Yeah, and it looks like we're going to be just fine, just barely. A bit of an eccentric mess of an orbit is what we end up here with here. What happens if I face this way? That seems to do the opposite of what I want to do, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. I just want to get this orbit as circular as possible. Everything over here just seems hunky-dory. So what's going on is the game has experienced a bug. So we're going to go back to here. Yeah, with it not showing me orbit lines or anything that's actually going on. Actually, I know what happened. It thinks the vessel crashed, even though it clearly hadn't. Let's try this autosave. Oh no, it just lost control due to not enough resources. Ah, okay. Well, it has enough resources now. Let's try this again. Since I know I'm aiming for a lower orbit, I might actually aim for behind the command module. Let's try about like that. Okay, heading 090, which is this way. $15, $16, $17, $18, $19, $20. I don't know what phantom forces are acting on here that are making this thing think it's changing its orbit. There's obviously some phantom force happening, which is unfortunate. I don't understand. Seems to resolve itself under time acceleration. Maybe it's because it was thinking there's a thin atmosphere on the moon? $20 by 27, maybe what we need to do. Okay, now it's showing us with an orbit line. Here's our apoapsis. Let's go ahead and warp here. We're at my apoapsis. We want to go prograde to raise our periapsis. The rest of the way. And that's good enough. We're circularized, we're under control, we're ready to go. This craft is only 36 kilometers away. So we'll go ahead and control it. Set this as our target. Now, when it comes to orbital mechanics, the natural thing would be like, oh, this craft is ahead of me. Let's go ahead and thrust towards it. But what that's going to do is it's actually going to increase our orbit like this, which means our orbit will take longer, which means this craft actually gets further ahead. So in orbit, we want to do the opposite of what's intuitive. I'm going to go ahead and thrust retrograde. And we can see some encounters building up here. In the 28 kilometer range. So with retrograde selected in the maneuver box, we can go ahead and fire up the main engine slightly to make it so that our orbit is somewhat lower than the target craft orbit. And which really means that at our closest approach, which is pretty much here at the apoapsis now, you can see our closest approach is pretty good, right? I'm just going to minimize this. In fact, I don't even need to. I'm not going to bother using main engine anymore. It's not precise enough. I can use RCS to just add a little bit of thrust here and there, since I have plenty of it, until that's minimized. Beautiful. And then we can do another fine tune over here at our periapsis. Now, I'm not going to do the rendezvous in the dark. That's just a recipe for awful pain and suffering. But I'll at least get our orbits figured out. Once again, I'm just kind of trying some thrust here. Looks like thrusting prograde is doing a good job of minimizing that distance. Okay, we've hit the sort of local minimum there. What happens if I provide some lateral thrust? Nothing? Up or down thrust? Not much. All right. So that brings us within a kilometer. And we can now watch. There it is. We can now watch as we get closer to this. So I can switch this to target now, and it gives me new information. So the nav ball is now telling me what my relative speed is compared to this craft. I'm just waiting for this thing to get to it past its closest point before I do anything else. And looks like that's it. So I believe this is prograde with respect to the target. Yes. Now we're going to retrograde with respect to the target. And we can just change our meters per second. Going to fire up the main engine for this one. Just barely. Okay. We are now essentially in station keeping with the main target. So as soon as we get ourselves over to the light side of the Mun, somewhere approximately here maybe? Let's go ahead and face the target. We're only 1 kilometer away. Why can I not change the zoom level for this thing? This is a crazy camera level. First thing I want to do actually is match velocity. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, face the target. Let's go ahead and start moving towards the target. One meter per second is probably plenty. And we will go ahead and control from here. See if we are able to lock on to the docking clamps of my target. Well, there's one thing I want to change. Options. Input. I'm noticing that my translation thrusters seem to be backwards. Translate X, translate Y, translate Z, and H. Isn't there a way to just reverse this? Oh well, doesn't look like it. I'm sorry, that was translate. Translate Y, IK. Translate down. Translate up. There we go. Now that's what I'm expecting to see on the nav ball, as far as translation is concerned. So we have plenty of monopropellant for this. We can go ahead and spend some to actually get there at a reasonable time. And that's the trick for, or those are the tricks for having two vessels meet each other. The idea is you're synchronizing their orbits in such a way that they reach relatively close to the same spot at the same time, which is hard to do when both of them are moving at, with respect to orbit, 500 meters per second. But given a fixed orbit, you know from where something is, you can determine where it's going to be, and then it's just a mathematics problem. A somewhat complex one, but it's not too bad. To arrange your orbit so that you're able to meet up with it at the same time. And remember, if the craft you are looking for is ahead of you by more than about, say, I would generally about 3 kilometers or about 3 kilometers. If it's more than that, being able to catch it like this is going to be really problematic. You want to get underneath a kilometer if you can. At least in the Kerbal systems. In Earth, it's more like 30 kilometers. Any more than that, it's best to make sure you just do a maneuver using the orbital dynamics to get everything where you want it. If it's ahead of you, turn retrograde, add a little bit of thrust, and that makes your orbit take less time. Takes your orbit smaller, which takes less time to go around the racetrack. If the craft is behind you along the orbit, turn prograde and do the same thing. That makes your orbit larger, it makes your orbit take longer, and that other craft is able to catch up. In other words, do exactly the opposite of what seems intuitive at the time. Now, when you get down to ranges like this, we're within docking ranges, we no longer have to treat this like curved space. We can treat this as pretty straightforward Newtonian space and aim directly at it, much like I've done here. Coming up on 190 meters. Closing in at 4.5 meters per second. There it is. I can see the actual visual as opposed to the icon in the way. And we happen to be actually facing the right side of the craft, which is fortunate. Within 100 meters, I'm going to go ahead and hit the brakes. At about 1 meter per second, it'll take me a minute to get there, which is enough time to adjust for everything else. So we'll just go for 1 meter per second and then trim out our other stuff here. And if possible, I want to set this docking ring as the target. Clampetron set as target. Beautiful. So if I'm controlling from here, with the Clampetron set as the target, this gets a lot easier. I'm sort of upside down from what I expect my orientation to be. I'm going to go ahead and hit the brakes some more. Bring this down to a nice slow closure. I want to do this sort of thing. Currently I'm pointed directly at it, but I don't want to be. And for Kerbal Space Program, this ought to be good enough. Clip and capture. Turn the SAS on, get us stable. We're going to go ahead and shut down this engine. Now, we have 1,000 delta V to work with, so we could actually escape with the Lunar Orbiter if we wanted to, if we had room to empty it. I can't believe, after all that, my crew decided to go on vacation and sneak someone aboard. I hope they brought enough snacks because he's going to be here for a while. But what I normally do if I had the room for it is go ahead and transfer Jeb into the gumball, disconnect all of this, and we could fly home, and this would just remain in orbit around Mun. But that's not the case. It looks like this and Jeb are going to be remaining in orbit around Mun, unless I want to crash Jeb through the atmosphere. That could be interesting. Nah, we'll plan a rescue mission for him later. So with all that said, it's a fancy way of saying congratulations, we've managed to dock. Now we're going to get ourselves set up for leaving the Mun altogether. So another quick save, another manual save. No! Okay, good. Well, it looks like our quick save's fine. I hit the wrong button. And we're going to undock. Undock. Control from here. And prepare for our return trip. Somewhere approximately here, since I'm orbiting counterclockwise, I'm going to create a new maneuver node. So, to basically set up a burn that does two things all at once. One, it prepares escape velocity from the Mun, which ends up being here, and then I'm in an elliptical orbit around Kerbal. The other thing that this does reason is it actually can be used to change my periapsis. And as we, when it comes to orbital mechanics, the best place to change your periapsis, the best place to change your periapsis is at the apoapsis. Our current apoapsis is essentially the mun, so we want to do as much of this work in one burn as possible. If I have multiple burns, it's just less efficient on the engine, less efficient on my resources. Well, that's a huge problem. We have plenty of resources for this burn. But I like to do a single burn with a small course correction as needed once we leave the sphere of influence. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to re-entry height, which I have found 35 kilometers to be pretty good for a re-entry from Mun. And this burn has to be relatively precise. But it looks like we are all set to go 38 minutes from now. Making absolutely certain that our control orientation is correct this time. And our friend Jebediah Kerman just hanging out in the Munner lander. All right, coming up on 20 seconds before the burn to leave the Mun. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, punch it. 270 Delta V is all we need. The ship has plenty. If I really wanted to, I probably could have kept myself connected to the Munner lander and brought it along for the ride. 2, 1, cut off. I'm going to change the gimbal limit on this. Doesn't seem like it was a little unstable. Let's check my actuals. And it looks like our periapsis came out to a little low. It's a little bit tasty and low, so we're going to go ahead and clean up those residuals with some RCS. Which we have plenty of for the mission. Bingo. Everything's all set. Let's go ahead and warp to... We'll warp to leaving the Mun's sphere of influence. Combined 5 is on a crashing trajectory. Yeah, something happened with physics because this thing was in a stable orbit around Mun, and now it's not. But our periapsis and everything is just fine. So, I don't care. I don't know why this thing had to do any propagation of physics whatsoever. It should have been physics on rails. Oh well, someone else's problem. Basically, we are now just free coasting away from the Mun towards Kerbin. And there it is. So if I go ahead and warp to here, our periapsis and everything is still good. All right, we're coming up on 200 kilometers away from sea level. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves configured for re-entry. I like to face myself on a plane change trajectory when I decouple. And all we have to do at this point really is just activate the further stages to decouple and activate our parachutes for re-entry. And we are now all set. Configure retrograde in the box for our re-entry capsule configuration. And everything else is up to science. I wish this game had the re-entry effects in it, but it doesn't right now. It's additional work coming soon. But re-entry and thermal dynamics coming later on down the pipe. Where are we landing at anyway? Looks like we're probably landing on the other side of, I don't know, Smindia, Kerbindia. We should be hitting primary re-entry interface right now. Yep, we can see our orbital velocity is slowing down, which means the air friction is doing its work. Rather minimal G-load. And take a look at the map and see how the aero braking is affecting our orbit. Just consistently bringing it down. Surface speed looks fine. Continuing to slow down, continuing to get deeper in the atmosphere. Surface speed now 1,400 meters per second. We could probably turn off SAS and let aerodynamics do its job. The drogue chutes are out and everything looks fantastic. Those drogues providing just a little bit of additional resistance. Yes, this will be a nice straightforward splashdown. 300 meters per second, 13,000 meters. Which is about as high as a typical transatlantic or trans-Pacific jet will fly. 7,000 meters, 230 meters per second surface speed. (4,000 meters above sea level). Parachute deployment is set for 1,000 meters. And chute deployment, our parachutes look good. Coming down safe and sound. So as you could see along the way, we were able to do a full lunar mission, including all the Apollo style work. Which really highlights how the game is handling changing craft configurations. There were some issues to resolve here and there. A couple of times we had to reload a save game or things like that. But all those bugs will be addressed as time goes on. And there we have it. Splashdown. And this concludes this mission and this episode. In future episodes, we're going to start exploring a Kerbal version of the American space program. We'll start off with a Mercury flight on a suborbital trajectory. Accomplish those quote-unquote milestones. Then we'll do an orbital flight with a bigger rocket. Or I'm sorry, no, Mercury was all suborbital. Then we will set up a Gemini mission to do orbital flight work. This is interesting how this is rocking back and forth. Why is there more and more force being applied? Whatever. Boop. Stop it. It's stable. And then all that orbital work, and that's actually going to would lead up to the technology necessary and the knowledge necessary to accomplish this kind of flight. After that series, I'll be tracking Kerbal Space Program through its updates to see how things are coming along. I'm looking forward to when there's more of a game in here in the science mode. It was the first mode that made Kerbal Space Program 1, the original, more of a game as opposed to a sandbox. So we'll see how that shapes up and how the bugs get shaken out as time goes on. Until then, I'm Sim Gamer, and this has been Kerbal Space Program 2 Early Access.